Our connections make powerful things happen, uniting individuals and communities. We are Rotary. We are people of action. And together, we turn great ideas into reality by accessing our networks, our experience, and the best of ourselves to make a difference. Around the world, Rotary brings leaders together to build new friendships and to solve problems. Like in Austria, where generations work side by side to come up with innovative ways to build sustainable housing and community centers, everyone learning from each other. In India, volunteers run a mobile blood bank to help provide a steady blood supply for their local community. And in Taiwan, people are working hard to get vulnerable citizens the support and services they need. With over 1 million members, we know what people can do when they come together. In your backyard and around the world, there's power in our connections. Take action with us. Find out more at Rotary.org.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's exactly 12 noon, so we'll get underway. To this month's Zoomformation call for zones 33 and 34 and more. We have a great treat for you today. First, please acknowledge the rules of the Zoom that have been published on the screen a few minutes ago. Don't forget to tell us where you're from by listing your name and your place of residence in the chat box, and we'll get underway. So it's my very great privilege and sincere pleasure to be able to introduce today's speaker, past Rotary International President, Ravi Ravindran. Ravi, I think, will be well known to most of us. He, of course, is the current chair of the Rotary Foundation Board of Trustees. He was the Rotary International President in the 2015-2016 year. He has visited our zones on several occasions. He was the keynote speaker at our institute in Asheville years ago. He spoke at the Rotary Club of Wilmington, Delaware, and he also visited Washington, D.C. a few years ago, where I had the privilege of hosting for 3 days of meetings with Rotary clubs and other Rotary events. As you might expect from a past Rotary International president, Ravi has held virtually every senior or chaired every senior office that it is possible to hold or chair. But I want to tell you 3 particular factoids about Ravi, which I think you'll find of interest. Ravi is a member of the Rotary Club of Sri Lanka. He's from Sri Lanka. Some years ago, Sri Lanka was embroiled in a very bitter civil war. During that war, notwithstanding the perils from the fighting factions on both sides of this civil war, Ravi was instrumental in persuading the government and the forces on either side to halt their fighting for a few days so that the polio workers could come in and administer the drops. It was an amazingly brave thing to do, and just a typical of Ravi's illustrious career of service. He was also instrumental in helping when the tsunami hit the eastern seaboard of Sri Lanka. Many schools were lost, and he led the recovery effort and was responsible for overseeing the reconstruction of 25 schools for some 15,000 children. Again, an amazing achievement. And then more recently, after he had completed his year as Rotary International President, the Sri Lankan government did him the honor of issuing a postal stamp in his honor, the first time that a living person had been honored by the issue of a postal stamp. Ravi is quite an extraordinary fellow. He's the chief executive of Print Care, which is a major tea packaging industry in Sri Lanka. It's a worldwide company. There are many wonderful things about Ravi. He's just a very warm personality. And it is a great pleasure today that we welcome past Rotary International President and current Trustee Chair, Ravi Ravindran. Please give a warm welcome to Ravi. And Ravi, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Peter. First of all, am I coming through clear, audible?
Yes, yes.
Great.
Yes.
Peter, many thanks with that elaborate introduction. I'm grateful to you, good man that you are. Steffi, nice to be with you. And it's nice to see past Director David Stowell here. David, your mustache has got whiter than before since I last saw you. I love coming to Washington. I wish I could have come personally. I've been traveling there for many times when my son used to study at Georgetown, and it's a great place to be. Today was a bad day for me because I just had a call from my office that with our usual COVID protocol, we found 3 positive cases for the first time, and that, it's a problem now. So this COVID has really messed up this whole world. I mean, at a meeting in the WHO headquarters in February 2018, a group of scientists debated which of the world's most frightening epidemic diseases deserve the greatest attention. Was it Ebola, killer disease that drains its victim of bodily fluids? Is it Nipah, which makes the brain swell before most of its victims die? Is it SARS, which affects the lungs, leaving the sick gasping for air? And at the end of the 2 days gathering, the group topped the list off with the most terrifying entry of all. They called it Disease X. It was meant to capture what scientists had warned about for decades: an unknown pathogen with no known treatment or cure that would likely originate in animals, jump to humans, and start spreading silently and quickly. Scientists now, they couldn't predict the precise genetic makeup of the pathogen or when it would strike, but they knew it would come. They even picked locations where such a virus might originate. They had ideas about how it might begin infecting people and how easily transmissible it would be. They even had plans of how to detect and stop it. But when the disease did come, they soon found they were caught flat-footed. As someone said, governments spend trillions of dollars to build vast militaries, track the movement of armies across the planet, over the oceans, practicing war games against them, against each other, against all sorts of imaginary people. And yet the world was unprepared to defend itself against a tiny microbe about 1/10,000th the size of a full stop at the end of your sentence. As of date, over 46 million have been infected and over 1.2 million have died around the world. People compare this with dying of flu. You know, when one dies of COVID, the death is often a lonely death, usually in a hospital, saturated with fear, seeing only ghostly figures covered in a spacesuit with nary a friendly face in sight. Grieving families have to incur further indignities. No proper funerals, hurried burials, barely a chance to mourn. In my country, no burials are allowed. It's only cremations. And my Muslim friends are up in arms over it. And then there are other costs. The equivalent of nearly 400 million jobs have been lost. Just day before yesterday, I listened to two Qantas Airlines A380 captains whose changed life situation was quite dramatic. They had come just the previous month, having parked their planes, their two aircraft in the Mojave Desert in California or Nevada, wherever it is, and they are now driving buses for Sydney. In fact, the interviewer asked them, so which is more stressful, piloting this A380 or driving the bus? And one of them said, well, you know, after I take off, I go to sleep, I watch movies. Here I have to be intenseful every minute on the road. So the bus is more stressful. IMF says global output is on track to fall 5% this year, far worse than the financial crisis. World Bank says 100 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty. The World Food Programme believes that a wave of hunger and famine threatens to sweep across the globe. UNICEF calculates close to 900 million students in 50 countries are unable to go to school. And of course, in Rotary, we know that already our vaccinations are suffering, routine vaccinations are suffering at every stage. And then we see governments grappling with a difficult decision, including my government just now. Should we shut down to keep people alive, or should we stay open to keep the economy going? Hobson's choice, whichever choice you make, you're at a loss. Finding a vaccine is the only answer to all these travails. But I would not get our hopes up too soon. For if you think that this immediately after the vaccine is found is going to be a typical Hollywood ending where everyone lives happily ever after, well, you're mistaken. The painful truth is that we are not returning to a pre-COVID-19 world, full stop. Even if a vaccine was to emerge, making and administering billions of doses will take much of next year. Early vaccines may well need 2 shots and complex cold chains to keep them afresh. Those of us involved in polio know the problems with 1 box of cold chain for our virus, for our vaccine. Medical glass, I'm told, could run short. Freighting these vaccines across the world in cold boxes will be a challenge. Do you know that IATA estimates that they will need 8,000 747s to deliver all these vaccines? Then, of course, there's the question, who gets the first lot of supplies? Nonetheless, this is the world in which Rotary has to operate, and that's why I'm telling you all this. We cannot simply wish it away and say, okay, Rotary is now in a perfect world. Life for us will certainly be different, at least for some time. When we are not mobile, how can our members see the sickness left uncared for? How do we see the parched land which might need water? How do we notice bare classrooms which might need tables or desks or even teachers for the children? How do our cadre members in the foundation visit project sites? And how do our scholars thrive in an isolated environment when they don't have a campus to go to? The new clubs that are being formed and the old clubs being lost are both happening in a virtual world, not a real one. But then it is what it is. The foundation's response to COVID was swift and impactful. We awarded 319 COVID-specific disaster response grants for $7.2 million. And we awarded 331 COVID global grants for approximately $21.7 million, making a total outflow of approximately $30 million in just a matter of weeks. Many grants were processed and awarded in days. I have to say, staff did a fabulous job and they couldn't even operate from the building, operating from their homes. Maybe they are more efficient when they work from home. In fact, world over, philanthropic response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been phenomenal. At least $10.3 billion has been donated globally by May 2020. On the one hand, it augurs well for Rotary, which relies on philanthropy-minded people and entities to raise its funds. On the other hand, the virus has also affected Rotarians themselves, and therefore Rotary itself faces unprecedented challenges. Many Rotarians have lost their jobs. Some have even succumbed to the virus. In fact, I lost some very, very close friends, two very close friends. Plus, we lost past President Louis Jai, one of my favorite past presidents and a very, very close friend of mine. Many others have been subjected to having their income slashed. Many businesses of Rotarians have seen substantial drop in revenues, and some are struggling to meet their recurring costs. In this situation, there are two factors that Rotary International and the foundation depends on most for survival, and they are both at stake. I'm referring on the one hand to membership, and on the other hand, contributions to the foundation. And in the normal circumstances, I would expect both these to suffer. But then again, I said normal circumstances, and Rotarians are not normal people. I tend to think that in many cases, they're extraordinary people. Indeed, history shows that Rotarians are a curious breed. Rotarians in general are visionaries, an idealistic lot that dream big and dream often of a better world. At the same time, we are resilient and we are able to withstand challenges that ordinary people might succumb to. Take, for example, the 1919 Spanish flu. 500 million people got affected, 50, 60 million died. Our membership actually increased by 19%. In 1921, after the Great Recession, our membership actually went up 26%. In 1957, after the Asian flu, our membership increased 3%. And in 2009, after the swine flu, membership never increased, it stayed stable. But annual giving to the foundation went up 20%. However, having said all this, there is no gainsaying that the trustees of our foundation do have an onerous responsibility to steering our foundation at this most challenging of times. Leadership, my friends, matters most and is most challenged when people face independent threats, when customary ways of working are no longer possible, and when confusion and anxiety overflow. During these crises, leaders have to take tough choices, must make hard decisions so that their organization can survive in the short term, but more importantly, thrive in the long term. One of the tough decisions the foundation had to make, with great unhappiness, I must tell you, was to eliminate the 50% match to cash for next year, for this year. The problem is, it wasn't because we simply ran short of cash, although we did. The problem is that our global grants have become so popular that we have now become victims of our own success. So actually we should be rejoicing, not regretting. For example, let me give some numbers. In 2013-14, there were 870 grants at a total value of just under $50 million. In 2018-19, that's 4-5 years later, there were nearly 1,500 grants at a total value of just under 90 million. So contributions increased by 10%, true. The demand for grants went up 80%. Our expenditure on global grants, and I'm trying to give you another example, only in the month of July and August this year was $48 million compared with a budget of $16 million and a comparison of last year, which was $19 million. We funded in these 2 years alone 715 grants as against 271 last year. So you can see how things have just gone through the roof. We have actually reached the point that annual contributions are just not keeping pace with demand for global grants. Not surprising, since nearly 20% of our clubs do not contribute a dime to our annual fund. And this is an unacceptable situation. The United States, in many ways, has always been a star performer relatively. You have the vision to see what others cannot. You have the ability to see the problems, the potential, the promise, and the purpose. Apart from annual fund, which drives our World Fund, you are the ones who can see that we have to raise enough money for polio. And you have always helped us to take advantage of the Gates match. I mean, it makes business sense, right? When you give $1 from your DDF, it's matched by another dollar from our World Fund. And those $2 is then doubled by Gates, making a total of 6. So speaking of polio, you are the ones who can equally play a significant role in the distribution of the COVID vaccines. If we can make such an arrangement, we must. After all, we are better equipped than anyone else to do this, thanks to our polio experience. In fact, I must tell you that the polio infrastructure Rotary helped build is now being used to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 by supporting preparedness and response activities in many countries, just as the Global Polio Eradication Initiative did in the past, responding to outbreaks of Ebola, to yellow fever, and to avian flu. In many places like Nigeria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, polio staff are tracing contacts and testing for COVID-19, combating misinformation, and sensitizing health professionals on the disease. So you see, the nature of the business we do has really not changed. We are still reaching out to people in distress, even during this COVID, except that our methodology by which we do it needs to change. Our process of preparing and delivering the project needs to change. The way we communicate what we do needs to change. You see, public health emergencies like the coronavirus can bring out the worst in people, but it can also provide inspiring examples of people who have chosen to be good and kind and great. We belong, I think, to that second type. We want to belong to that type anyway. Situations like this also reveals the most unlikely heroes, even in Rotary. Every morning I spend an hour in the gym, and I'm listening. I mean, my best source of entertainment every morning, of course, is CNN and Fox News. And then I watch Al Jazeera, I watch Bloomberg, and I watch the Indian news channels to get a cross-section, and BBC, of course. In 1.25 hours, I have a cross-section of what's happening around the world. And the other day, watching an Indian channel, I saw a news item, where the announcer was speaking about COVID in Mumbai and saying they're not able to cope with the deaths. And she was saying about no room in crematoriums. And then she says, thank God for these people from Rotary who have come and they have made makeshift crematoriums. And she shows people lifting bodies and putting it into the fire with Rotary t-shirts, Rotary something. I was so moved. I mean, I thought, what the hell, I'm going around making speeches. Look at these guys, what they're doing. It's the ultimate in service, if you ask me. So I actually called Bharat Pandya and said, Bharat, I want to know which club is doing this, because I think every leader has a personal obligation to thank them for what they are doing. You see, there lies in each Rotarian a passion that only needs to be awakened, like these guys. All great achievers in Rotary have this passion. And even in these difficult days, this is the type of visionaries we need to harness. This is the passion we need to awaken. Sure, all of our ideas may not work, but our passion will have a tremendous impact. I want to give you an example. Back home in my country, I am in my country, down here in my country, two of my close Rotary friends, Abbas and Ajay, and I were having a drink. And we were talking about the situation in our country of children with mental health issues. You know, 20% of Sri Lankan children were affected by disabilities. Only 1 in 93 have been diagnosed as autistic. As in other developing countries, cerebral palsy affects 2 to 5% of all children born. Now, in a situation like this, three of us having a drink, we could only shrug our shoulders and do something we are very good at, which is criticize our government for not doing anything about it. But our passion got the better of us. We could visualize a properly equipped center to treat children with such disabilities. So in the next few weeks or months, the right people were spoken to, and they became partners to a project. The University of Sri Lanka made available the land, gifted the land. The Sri Lanka army was negotiated with, because we have no war now, they're idling. We said, build these premises for us. And they agreed to do it within 13 or 14 months, which they did. We had two major cash infusions from my two friends, Ajay and Abbas, of $1 million each from their companies. These two guys never come for Rotary meetings. But I thank the lucky stars that we have people like this and we never sacked them when they came up with this cash. Rotary, with a global grant, made available all the equipment. The value was some $350,000 or $400,000. But building and equipping was easy. Sustainability was the long term, was the key in the long term. So we negotiated a deal with the Faculty of Medicine of our university that they would relocate themselves there, absorb all the operational and maintenance costs, and they would provide trained professionals in the field of disability studies and take care of all initial screening interventions. What did they get in return? A 43,000 square feet center costing $5 million of world class. I mean, it's as good as anything you can show me in your country. A fabulous complex to operate from, which Mark Maloney came and opened for us just before he gave up his presidency this January. The center already has registered outdoor patients from nationwide, numbering over 5,000, and we are just in the process of beginning to build a sort of a dormitory for parents to stay when they bring their children. All this provided with all services provided free of charge. You know, it's a remarkable project, even if I had to say so myself. It's the type of project that our new programs of scale launched this year, where we put aside $2 million and we're trying to give it to one entity, measure all the projects, give it to the best one. And we just don't want them to spend the money on the project. We want them to use this money as a sort of a seed money to leverage it with other investments to make a gigantic project, a big project. And this project, which I just related to you, we didn't use the Rotary money, we didn't use this grant money, but that's the type of example I'm looking at. Rotary gives $350,000. We use our connections and everything else to put together a $5 million project to reach over 5,000 kids at a time, all given a vital service which they never had before in the best of conditions. So I ask you to be hopeful. There is hope. And I remind you to not forget that we will be measured on our ability to handle the current adversity and uncertainty. We have a responsibility to provide the inspired leadership our members yearn for. We have a responsibility, as someone said, to serve as a lighthouse for our foundation when the fog of life seems to leave us wandering in circles. We have a responsibility to demonstrate in action our support for our foundation in a most tangible manner. We have a responsibility to vindicate the figures that Johns Hopkins University put on the value of work done by Rotarians in terms of volunteer hours, $850 million per annum. Most of all, we have a responsibility to God and country for it's His work that we do down here. So put your faith in Him and step out boldly. We will succeed. In fact, I am reminded constantly of a comparison made by a former head of the Salvation Army in a speech he made at a Rotary convention many years ago, when he said that each one of us lives in two worlds. One is the world of reality. The other is the world of spirituality. We are citizens of both worlds, make no mistakes. One world is visible, the other world is invisible. One world is fluctuating, the other is constant. One is transient, the other is imperishable. One world is the world of revolutions, the other is the world of revelations. One is the world of unrest, anxiety, and the world of the body. The other is the world of quietness, stability, and it's the world of the spirit. Both these worlds are real, my friends, don't make no mistakes. And they exist under the sovereignty of God. With His help, we live in both worlds. In one, we meet our challenges, and in the other, because of organizations like Rotary and its foundation and the opportunities it creates for us, we find our sanctity and our peace. So I wish you well. I ask you to be safe, and I ask you to always keep the foundation foremost in your minds in everything you do in Rotary. Thank you very much.
Ravi, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We appreciate it. And especially thank you for reminding us that as Rotarians, we are idealists, we are resilient, and we are people of action. And some of that action means that we have to continue to not only support, but participate in the Rotary Foundation and the magic we do around the world, especially in this time of COVID. If you have a few moments, I would ask if there are any questions, and I believe Past Director David is going to monitor the chat. So friends and family of Rotary, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat, and Trustee Chair Ravi will be happy to address them.
If I can.
I'm sure you can. Past Director David, do we have any questions that are popping up?
We don't have any questions yet. Let's just give it maybe 30 seconds in case anyone has any that before we move on.
Okay.
If you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat pane now.
I probably didn't make any sense to anyone.
You
you
made great sense.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Ravi is in Sri Lanka, and I believe it's probably around 11 o'clock at night for him. So we really do appreciate you giving some time to be with us.
We're seeing some comments about great information, and yes, you did share great things with us, Chairman Ravi, but we don't have any questions, Stephanie, so back to you.
Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. And again, Ravi, thank you. And we want to thank Past Director David for setting up our Zoomformation call today, as he always does. We appreciate that. And to the 117 of you who participated in the call today, from I think around 10 different countries. We truly had an international call today, and we appreciate you being with us. I do want to remind you that next month when we meet again on the first Monday in December, we're going to be looking at a program dealing with the December Rotary theme, which is disease prevention and treatment. And we will have a panel of people who will share information in this era of COVID. I think you will find the presentations to be very useful as well as very interesting. We will also have a special cameo guest. So I hope that you will mark your calendar for Monday, December 7th at noon Eastern Time. And before we go to the four-way test, I want to remind you to please, if you haven't already, if you are from the US, do your civic duty and vote. And if you are from zones 33 and 34, do your Rotary duty and register for the Summit of Champions. All right, Past Director David, if you'll put up the four-way test, I'll lead us all. Of all the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will appeal goodwill and better friendship?
Will it be beneficial
to all concerned? Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Good being with you. Bye.